Березняк, Пчовжа, Горчакова, Коровино сельцо, Будагощ. These are just a few random names of small towns and settlements located near where I live. They are not forgotten dots in the edge of the map. These are ordinary places, about 20 kilometers from the second largest city in Russia. I live here in St. Petersburg. When I was kid, I used to watch foreign movies, and even back then I noticed one strange thing. Any places, names of cities, lakes, rivers, states, sounded completely different there. California, Nevada, Palm Springs, Silver Lake, Houston. Even if you don't know where these places are, you almost automatically get a feeling that this is a place you could want to be in. And since childhood, one question never really left my head. Why do some names instantly create an image and a mood, while others leave you with emptiness or tension inside? I really tried to understand where this difference in perception comes from. First of all, of course, a lot depends of language itself. Russian has a lot of consonants. It's a harder language with no real attempt to soften the sound. For example, let's take two names with almost the same meaning. Near Moscow there is a settlement called Черная грязь. The Russian version sounds quite harsh. In English it would be black mud, and it already feels different, softer, easier to perceive. Or another example, Серебряное озеро. Not the worst sounding name by my ear, but in English it is Silver Lake. And personally I feel much more drawn to Silver Lake than to Серебряное озеро, because the sound itself already creates an image. And beside that, Russia has a lot of place names that feel completely plain to me. They are formed from first names or last names, and they sound more like people than place. Things like Kantemirovka, Stasova, Olgina, Matveyevka. This is a whole separate category, names without much uniqueness, without a clear sound image. By the way, Matveyevka is a name derived from my surname, Matveyev. And the surname itself comes from name Matvey. But I have absolutely no personal connection to this place. I've never really noticed people worrying much about this topic. Either they think about it but don't talk about it, or they don't think about it at all. The fact that there are almost no videos about this on Russian YouTube is quite telling. It seems like we don't really pay attention to things like that. And yet, even for us, for people who are used to living inside a rather harsh, consonant-heavy Russian language, there are place names that sound strange. Chopped, hard to pronounce. For example, Poland. Here are a few city and towns names. Prushkov, Жирардов, Лодзь, Згеж, Петрков Трибунальский, Буска-Здруй, Bzeg. Even for my ear, and I am used to Russian speech and Russian names, this sounds quite unusual. A lot of consonants, sharp combinations, names that feel like they don't want to be pronounced easily. And then I became genuinely curious. How does all of this sounds to native English speakers? If even we perceive these names as harsh and chopped, what kind of feeling do they create for people whose language is naturally softer, more vowel-heavy, more flowing? There is one more thing about the Russian language that's worth mentioning. It allows you to create many different forms from the same word. This happens with the help of prefixes, suffixes, and changes in the endings. As a result, words with a common root can have more or less different meanings. For example, There is a whole group of place names derived from the word hren. Technically, hren is just a plant, horseradish, the kind of used to make of spicy sauce, similar to mustard. But in everyday speech, this word also has a second life, as a rogue slang expression. And because of that, you can find places on the map called Хренище. This is the big хрен. Хреново, when you feel very bad. Хреновая river, really bad. Lake Хрень, place of some mess. The funniest part is that in the village called Hrinova, people even added a stress mark on the road sign. Because if you pronounce it with the stress on the wrong syllable, it sounds like хреновая, which literally means really bad. It's a good example of how the same word can create completely different feelings, even before you know anything about the place itself. And then there are names that are on a completely different level, that make the tongue twisted on a hard mode. Just listen to this. Mcensk, Tpig, Pskov, Vzvat, Ždrinsk, Sisert, Jugba, Matsesta. Quick note, many Russian place names are centuries old. Words that sounds strange or funny today often meant something completely different when those names first appeared. Of course, Russia also has names that sounds beautiful and create pleasant associations. Sochi, Altai, Baikal, Karelia. And honestly, I feel a bit sad that there are not many of them. They are more like exceptions than the rule. I think that roughly the same number of pleasant sounding names exist in Russia as unpleasant sounding ones exist in America. If we look at large cities, the picture becomes even more interesting. There are names that sound confident, white, calm, as St. Petersburg, Moscow, Khabarovsk, and there are others, also large, also real. Челябинск, Тверь, Сызрань, Омск, Салихард, Кострома, Бобруйск. So why this question important at all? Why do I personally think this question matters? As much as we like to think of ourselves as rational people, people for whom content matters more than form, that is not really true. In reality, form plays a huge role. Form is what triggers the first feeling. Our brain makes judgment and conclusions in the very first milliseconds. When we see a person, we don't judge what they know or what they can do. We judge how they look, how they move, how they speak. And exactly the same thing happens with the names of places around us. We may not be aware of it, but the name of a place creates a mood, sets a feeling, and strongly affects how we feel, just by living among these words. This is about atmosphere. We don't live only in cities, we also live in their names.